Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. Early spring in the small, unassuming town of Maplewood was often cloaked in a blanket of gray. The unrelenting drizzle pelted down, creating rivulets that coursed through the cracked pavement, reflecting the somber mood of its inhabitants. On the outskirts, a dense thicket of trees loomed, remnants of a once majestic forest now encroached upon by modernity. Among the rustling leaves, secrets thrived, ready to be unearthed. It was during this melancholic season on a Monday morning that the town's tranquility was shattered. A local teenager, Mia Thompson, vanished while riding her bike to school. The sun had barely breached the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the chilling fog that draped the highways. Mia, a bright and studious girl, was known for her punctuality. It was out of character for her to miss school, let alone not return home. As the clock struck 10, panic began to ripple through Maplewood. Mia's mother, Claire, reported her absence to the town's police, fingers trembling as she clutched a crumpled flyer of her daughter. The officer on duty, sensing the urgency, initiated a search, calling in the local volunteers. Tension mounted as the town mobilized, scouring the streets, parks, and woods for any trace of the girl. The air buzzed with whispers of concern, casting a pall over the community. Hours slipped away, and in the stillness of the unfolding investigation, the darkness of the woods grew thicker, harboring untold tales just beneath its surface. The victim. Mia Thompson was not just another face in the crowded hallways of Maplewood High School. She was a vibrant spirit, brimming with aspirations. With her sincere smile and infectious laughter, she transcended the typical teenage angst that surrounded her peers. Friends described her as ambitious. She aspired to study environmental science, inspired by the sprawling landscapes that shaped her childhood. At home, Mia was the anchor for her single mother, Claire, working part-time at the local diner to support both of them. Their life was modest but filled with shared dreams. Claire often found herself enthralled by Mia's stories of potential trips to national parks and scientific projects. As the two discussed future plans over meals, a bond forged in hope and love flourished amid the uncertainties of payment bills and daily struggles. Mia's key characteristics shone brightly to those around her. She volunteered at animal shelters and engaged in sustainability clubs. Each Friday evening, she could be found hosting movie nights with her close-knit group of friends. These gatherings were treasured escapes infused with laughter, music, and an unwavering sense of camaraderie. However, as days morphed into troubling weeks, the dark side of isolation began its slow encroachment. On that fateful Monday, Mia had told a friend about an idea she had for a community garden project, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She had a vision that extended beyond herself, but her air of enthusiasm was alarmingly contrasted by the shadows forming around her after her disappearance. The police began to dig deeper into her life, innocent anecdotes morphing into a desperate search for explanations. The crime scene. As the early evening descended upon Maplewood, shadows wrapped themselves around the quiet streets. A storm had begun to brew, sending gusts of wind through the thinning trees and causing leaves to swirl anxiously in the air. The search for Mia had transitioned from frantic to methodical. Local law enforcement, equipped with police radios and flashlights, had gathered at the edge of the dense woods behind the school. It was here, just under the bent branches of an oak tree where Mia's bike was discovered. The sight sent ripples of dread through the searching party. The frame lay against the ground, its wheels eerily still. There were no signs of a struggle, just the remnants of what had once been a bustling route for a young girl content with her bike ride. They soon combed through the underbrush, touching clammy leaves and brushing aside tangled vines, hoping to unearth any clue that might illuminate the darkness that engulfed them. Each rustle of the foliage heightened the tension, proving that nature itself held its breath. A police officer, kneeling at the scene, noticed an unusual scuff mark on the ground. Following the trail of disturbed leaves, the officer's heartbeat quickened. It led deeper into the forest. The minutes stretched out painfully, like the tension coiling around their throats. Cell phones buzzed with updates, and concerned parents waited anxiously at the school, praying for news as darkness began to swallow the retreating daylight. Back in the woods, the air thickened with unease, and as the first cracks of thunder rumbled above, the search party braced themselves against the coming storm, a literal and figurative tumult that threatened to unravel all they had left to hold on to. The early investigation. The stark glow of police lights cut through the darkening woods, illuminating faces etched with worry and determination. Officers worked tirelessly, documenting each piece of evidence and interviewing people who might offer leads. Beyond the brief moments spent gathering physical evidence, the mood among officers was grave. Time was of the essence. The churning tide of uncertainty hung heavily in the air. Detective Mark Jennings, a veteran investigator known for his calm demeanor under pressure, arrived at the scene as the sky cracked open with sudden rain. He stepped out of his car and surveyed the area, keenly aware that every minute wasted was a minute lost in finding Mia. He quickly gathered information from the officers present and began to form at 7. Mia had left home at 7:00 a.m. Her friends last remembered her departing for school shortly thereafter. With the wind picking up, Detective Jennings organized a questioning strategy. First on his list were Mia's friends, those who might have seen or interacted with her just before her disappearance. Each encounter would map out the connections in her life, revealing a portrait of the victim that went beyond mere statistics. Simultaneously, a technician began processing the bike for fingerprints and other DNA samples that could potentially lead to a suspect. The force was painfully aware that assaults against young girls were often extreme, and they held their breath against the dark possibilities lingering in the back of their minds. As the investigation escalated, so did the tension in Maplewood. Hours passed, and with them came desperate calls from family and friends. Claire Thompson remained at the station, clutching her daughter's favorite sweater-y aroma of home wrapped around her like a lifeline. Outside, posters bearing Mia's face began to dot the town, merging hope, fear, and a collective call for answers in the silent night. The dead ends. As the days wore on, the initial fervor of the investigation began to wane, replaced by the daunting reality of dwindling leads. The community, once unified by a sense of urgency, now found itself gripped by restlessness and despair. Search parties roamed the woods tirelessly, each return marked by the heavy weight of unanswered questions and fading hope. Detective Jennings was acutely aware that with each passing hour, the likelihood of finding Mia alive diminished. Tips flooded in from concerned citizen sightings of a girl matching her description. Whispers of suspicious vehicles passing through town, but each lead amounted to nothing more than fragmentary threads, easily unraveling under scrutiny. The mounting pressure bore down like an impending storm. Families were disheartened, while law enforcement felt the slackening grip of urgency. 2 days into the search, the police received a tip about a man who had been seen acting suspiciously near a park, close to Mia's last known location. Officers descended on his home with fervor, only to discover he had a solid alibi, bolstered by security footage showing him elsewhere. It was just one more dead end among many, punctuated by the growing frustrations echoing through the precinct. Back in the heart of Maplewood, fog settled in like a shroud, cloaking the town in its melancholy essence. Claire's resolve began to fracture, her heart heavy under the weight of uncertainty. Each evening brought a gathering of families at the school gym, where they devised strategies to keep Mia's name alive, clinging to the belief that she could still be found. But as hours turned to days, the haunting reality of the unknown gnawed at the edges of their hope, leaving the community whispering in hushed tones about what might have truly happened to Mia Thompson, each theory more chilling than the last. A break in the case. On the 6th day of searching for Mia Thompson, just as the storm clouds seemed to perpetuate an endless stretch of despair, a small glimmer of hope emerged when a local teenager came forward with information. Jamie Emerson, a classmate and once a close friend of Mia's, had been toying with guilt ever since the day of her disappearance. After hours of sleepless nights and sharing whispers of concern with friends, he decided he couldn't stay silent any longer. That evening, Jamie met with Detective Jennings at the precinct, shifting nervously in his seat as he recounted a conversation he had overheard a week prior. 2 older boys, known to hang out near the park, had spoken of seeing Mia at the edge of the woods just moments before she vanished. They mentioned something about a confrontation, although Jamie couldn't hear the specifics. Their dismissive laughter had chilled him, echoing in his thoughts. Jennings listened intently, jotting down every detail before instructing his team to track down the boys. With a pointed focus, they scoured local establishments, speaking to various patrons each one had frequented. Within hours, they located the 2 boys, Jake and Tyler, who were admittedly taken aback by the police's interest. Jennings sensed unease in their demeanor as they faltered through their statements. Under questioning, they recounted their encounter with Mia outside the forest, spinning a tale of jest and harmless teenage pranks. But as Jennings pressed, their nerves began to unravel. Tales started to conflict, and their bravado dissipated. Later, while leaving the interrogation room, Jennings caught a glimpse of sweat beading down Jake's brow. That small but significant crack in their alibi provided the opening detectives desperately needed. The landscape of the case shifted, giving investigators the first real sense of direction as they felt the momentum building beneath them once more. The suspect. With the police now zeroing in on Jake and Tyler, Detective Jennings had a renewed sense of urgency. The boys' inconsistent stories warranted further scrutiny. The investigation shifted dramatically from the expansive search to focused surveillance. Officers began watching the suspects closely, gathering more information about their movements, friendships, and routine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky to watercolor hues of orange and gray, Jennings leaned over the evidence board in the precinct, a chaotic arrangement of photos, notes, and timelines. The threads connecting Jake and Tyler to Mia's last moments tightened with each passing hour. Interrogation footage revealed their anxious body language, fidgeting hands. They spoke too quickly, too defensively. It became clear the boys were hiding something. A week after Mia's disappearance, standing under the flickering lights of the downtown diner where Jake often gathered with friends, investigators spotted a familiar silhouette. Shock rippled through Jennings as he watched a gang of teenagers laughing and sharing stories around a booth. One of them, clad in a black hoodie, kept shifting his gaze toward the entrance. Confirming his suspicions, Jennings approached, greeting the boys with a calm authority. When questioned again, Jake's bravado crumbled. He could no longer maintain the facade of indifference. Beads of sweat began to form anew as Jennings pushed for more details about the day Mia disappeared. Tyler, threatened by the growing tension in the air, echoed Jake's sentiments but with shaky support. Back at the precinct, Jennings assigned 2 officers to follow the boys home. He had a hunch that they may lead him to the truth hidden beneath layers of teenage bravado. The faint thunder of an approaching storm mirrored the turmoil roiling within him. He sensed that something was about to break, a revelation hidden in the darkness. The trial. The courtroom echoed with tension as the community of Maplewood gathered for the trial of Jake Callahan and Tyler Moore. Each member held tight to the hope that justice would illuminate the darker corners of the case that had settled heavily upon their town. The air was thick with anticipation as concerned faces filled the benches, murmurs bouncing off the stark, gray walls, a cacophony of pain and resolve, converging into a singular focus on the accused. Early morning, and the judge presided over the proceedings with a solemnity that underscored the grim nature of the charges. Both boys faced multiple counts, including assault and unlawful confinement, stemming from their confessed involvement in Mia's disappearance. Hours turned into a flurry of testimonies, evidence, and emotional displays of grief, echoing throughout the room. As the prosecution laid out the timeline, Jennings sat in the front row, conflicted but resolute. The boys' earlier bravado dissolved during the testimonies, now overshadowed by emotion and regret. They spoke, tremors quaking through their voices as they recounted the moment that had spiraled out of control, a so-called prank that ultimately turned vicious. The seemingly harmless teasing transitioned into something far more sinister, leading to Mia's unintended detainment. Witnesses, including Mia's friends and classmates, took to the stand, their voices quivering under the weight of loss. The ripple effect of her absence had left scars on everyone who knew her, and this truth unfurled, wrapping around the courtroom like a chilling specter. Claire sat, unwavering but vulnerable, eyes steadfast, glistening with unshed tears. Each recounting of Mia's bright spirit juxtaposed against the grim reality of the trial drove home the bittersweet Lunginga reminder that justice was not merely a process, but a necessity for healing. As the defense tried to shift blame and minimize their involvement, the growing weight of public sentiment seemed to tilt the scales. The jury pondered the testimonies in a collective silence, the prospect of accountability lingering heavily in the charged atmosphere. As the judge readied to dismiss the court for deliberations, heralding what felt like a decisive moment for the grieving community, a collective breath of anticipation was held, hope intertwined with uncertainty. The aftermath. In the wake of the trial's conclusion, Maplewood recoiled from the emotional upheaval, that had gripped its tight-knit community. Though the verdict had brought a degree of closure, it was overshadowed by the aching void Mia's absence left behind. Jake and Tyler were sentenced to significant time in juvenile detention, an outcome that offered little solace to those who had known and loved the girl they took for granted. As the first fall leaves began to drift down, a somberness permeated. Flowers adorned the small memorial erected at the edge of the woods where Mia had last been seen. Blue and yellow petals intermingled colors that had represented Mia's vibrancy in life. Claire Thompson often stood quietly beside the tribute, placing fresh flowers every Sunday. Friends, classmates, and neighbors would visit to share stories, illuminating Mia's legacy through laughter and tears, their gatherings becoming a ritual of remembrance. Detective Jennings found himself reflecting on the investigation as the leaves turned golden, his heart heavy with unshakable questions. Though justice had been served, the impact echoed far beyond the courtroom. He often visited the memorial, seeking solace in the presence of those who still remembered in collective grief. The weight of lost potential, the haunting silence of a once lively spirit, lingered sharply in the autumn air. Local schools implemented programs honoring Mia's passion for environmentalism, creating projects that aimed to inspire and educate the youth in her legacy. A scholarship in her name was established to help aspiring students pursue their dreams, embodying the light Mia had shone in her time. Nevertheless, amid memorials and tributes, whispers of unease lingered, questions unfurling in the corners of conversations. What led to this tragedy? How could such innocence be lost so suddenly? But for now, Maplewood found itself stepping slowly into healing, enveloped in the hope that each day would bring the community closer to solace, holding hands as they walked through the shadow of grief towards the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Reflection. As the winter chill settled over Maplewood, a quiet introspection enveloped the community. The landscape, now stark and bare, mirrored the emotional terrain they had weathered together. In the silence of long evenings, Claire often sat by the fireplace, holding on to the warmth of memories that flickered like the flames before her. Each crackle reminded her of Mia's laughter, her zest for life, the dreams that remained unfulfilled. In conversations with friends and neighbors, Claire began to express her reflections, reminders of cherishing each moment and the fragility of life. The town, once gripped by fear and sorrow, chose to cultivate those embers of hope, igniting a collective focus on resilience. Locals formed support groups, sharing their own encounters with loss and heartache, fostering an environment of empathy. While the pain of Mia's absence lingered, the community slowly learned to celebrate her spirit through action. The scholarship fund flourished, and annual events dedicated to environmental preservation became a testament not only to Mia's dreams, but to the enduring power of community united in grief, love, and hope for a better future. Every story shared, every flower laid at the memorial, further stitched the fabric of their memories together. Reminded that though Mia was no longer physically present, her impact remained etched in the hearts of all who knew. In their reflection, each member of Maplewood found their own journey towards healing, ultimately intertwined with the memory of a girl who touched their lives profoundly.